Hi, Heather Baker here. This is my week 3 milestone 2 video, and first I'll be going over how my time was spent this week. The time you see spent here on Monday was spent mostly in XD and Adobe Illustrator, which was spent on my personal work project as I'm still in the UI and UX design phase of that application. You'll see the same thing here on Tuesday, where my time was spent in Adobe XD working on the user interface and interaction of my personal work project. On Wednesday, again, a majority of my time was spent on XD. However, on Wednesday, I did slip and fall on some ice, and therefore I was unable to start work on my Xcode project until much later in the evening, as I did end up going to the emergency room for a few hours. Over on Thursday was when I started the majority of my coding for this week. You'll see quite a bit of time spent in Xcode. And then moving on to Friday, again, here you'll see 11 hours spent on Xcode working on the project. And one thing that I did find is that my time estimates for this week were somewhat off. It did take me additional time to implement many of these features. Even though there wasn't that many bugs encountered, just the time spent due to my unfamiliarity with multi-peer connectivity did take much more additional time than I initially anticipated. And you can see this reflected again on Saturday, spending over 8 hours in Xcode, just working on that multi-peer connectivity and allowing the child device to dynamically update during the syncing process. Remember, on Sunday, you'll see my time was spent in Microsoft Word working on my weekly status update. The biggest issue I had this week was in this block of code that sends the chore information to the parent sync view controller, which is very similarly duplicated in the parent sync view controller to sync those chores with the child as well. However, originally I was attempting to send all chores together through an NS dictionary using a tuple for each of the chores that needed to be sent. Unfortunately, the NS dictionary was not compatible with that data type. So to overcome this, I ended up implementing code that would loop over all the chores that need to be sent and then send each one through its own dictionary that would then be received by the other device to allow it to properly merge the data within the core data. A logged in parent is able to tap on their child and see the details of their child's chores sorted by incomplete and complete chores, allowing them to tap on each chore and see the details of that chore. They're able to cancel the chore, which will remove the association with the chore and the child in core data, allowing the chore to then be shown in the past chores view controller. If a chore is marked completed while a parent is logged in, this will allow the chore to be marked completed and approved, which will accumulate that during the payout during the next sync or when the application is being used for both the parent and child on the same device. A chore can also be edited from the screen, which brings up a prompt asking the parent if they are sure that they do want to edit the chore. Once the chore becomes edited, then they're able to change any of the values within this as well as assign it to a different child. Upon saving a chore, the parent will be able to confirm that they do want to save the changes to the chore, which will then prompt them that the changes have been saved and navigate them back to where they can view all of those chores that have been assigned to their children. Once the sync button is pressed, the parent then has the ability to sync with their child. And once the connection is accepted, the parent is then prompted to input the PIN for the child, and then notify that the PIN has been verified. From there, both users are segued to the syncing screens, which allows the parent to sync the chores. As of this time, you'll see these chores are new, but once synced, you'll see that they're moved to pending because they have been marked as complete on the child device. Now that the chores have been completed, the parent is able to approve all, which will then allow them to cancel, or OK, which completes all chores and notifies the child user. They're also able to put everything into approve mode, which lets them know that the chores need to be swiped left to complete. Upon swiping left, they're able to complete an approve button, again prompting them to verify that they do want to approve the chore, which will then dynamically update on the child device, notifying the child that the dishes have been approved. The parent also has the option to edit the PIN. They are able to cancel, edit the child's PIN, the parent's PIN, or both PINs at the same time, which prompts them to input a new PIN. That will then be saved on either the parent device, the child device, or both devices, respectively, to the button that's pressed. Once that's verified, they are notified that the PIN has been changed, and if the child device has been selected to have the PIN changed as well, the child will be notified. A payout can also be completed, which then prompts the parent to either cancel or confirm the payout, which then dynamically updates the earned amount and notifies both users that a payout has been given. Once disconnected, the parent is then notified of the disconnection, which will also notify the child that has been disconnected and segue both users back to their main controller. The child views their chores, they're able to sort them by the time, the payout, and the priority. Upon tapping on a chore, they're able to see the details of the chore and complete the chore if desired, which brings up a prompt allowing them to either cancel the approval or complete the approval, which will let them know that the chore has been marked as complete. The child is now able to log out, giving them a confirmation as to whether or not they would like to log out, and then bringing them back to where another child would be able to log in and do their chores on the same device. When the child selects the sync button, they're prompted to connect with their parent, and once the connection is accepted and the parent inputs the PIN, the child is notified that the connection has been verified and then segued to the syncing view controller, where they're able to see their pending chores and new chores were any to exist. Once the chores have been synced and the parent is able to see their pending chore, the parent then approves the chores and the child is dynamically updated for each chore that is approved. If all chores are approved from the parent, the child will be notified that all chores have been approved. And if the PIN is edited, the child will be notified that the PIN has changed, but not what the PIN has been changed to. Once a payout is made by the parent, the child is, of course, notified that the payout has been made and the amount of the payout that has been given. This week, there was a significant amount of development time spent addressing the change requests, such as allowing the child to log out, changing everything so that the parent creates all the users rather than allowing the child to create their own user data. Additionally, it did take some time to implement allowing the parent to change all of the data for a chore rather than just updating who it was assigned to. The most time I spent this week was making the code to be able to send chores back and forth through the peer connection, just because of my minimum familiarity with the peer connection going into this project. It just took some time, and each feature that I implemented definitely got much quicker throughout the process. The least time I spent this week was updating the UI elements to fit better with the branding of the application, such as changing the navigation bar throughout the application to match the branding of the rest of the application. There was definitely minimal time spent researching this week, though there were a few times that I went back to some internet searches so I could verify that what I was doing was correct rather than having to go back and change things later. The time consumption this week was mostly spent sending the chores back and forth between the peer connection and updating the child device dynamically. For my future time management, being more familiar with the features that I'm going to implement before starting that implementation definitely will help things go quicker. However, what I found is that there's really no substitute for practice and having implemented that feature before. During this sprint, all change requests were successfully completed. The main child view controller is fully functional and allows the child to view the chores, sort the chores, and view the details of the chores, as well as mark those chores complete. They're now able to log out, so another child can log into the device and have multiple children use the same device, as well as sync with the parent. Implementing the view controller for the chore details did take a little bit of time due to the fact that it would be accessed by different users within the application, so I had to implement some changes as to how that view controller would function depending on where it was navigated from. There were no milestones left incomplete for this sprint, and I am on track to finish the project. In the next upcoming sprint, I'll be implementing the past chores view controller for the parent, as well as the adaptive layout for the application to be viewed properly on all possible iOS device sizes that are currently used. In addition to that, I'll be going over the program line by line, fixing any possible bugs that I may have missed thus far. To better manage my time next week and meet that Thursday deadline, I'll definitely need to get started earlier in the week, and as long as I maintain focus, I can definitely meet that deadline. I didn't have to spend any additional time this week creating assets for the project, as they were all created in that first sprint. The content for the application is user created, so there was no time gathering content for the project. There was minimal time spent this week with code experimentation. The code that I would consider experimentation was finding a way to send the chores back and forth through that sync. After my initial attempt at creating the tuples was unsuccessful, as it was incompatible with the NS dictionary, I was able to quickly find a viable option by going back to the way that I was sending other information between the users. Testing this week was done on an iPad Air 2 and the built-in simulator for Xcode. There were two significant bugs discovered this week. One of those was while attempting to send the tuples through the NS dictionary, which was easily solved by sending one chore at a time within its own dictionary. The other bug was in attempting to do an unwind segue in the completion of an alert, which was solved by finding another graceful way to inform the viewer that the child does no longer exist. I was the only tester at this stage of the development. Most of the application is working well and has a well-formed user experience. However, I will be submitting some change requests a little bit later on today to add options for the parent to make a payout or change their PIN without having to sync, which will allow the application to be used solely on one device if desired. There was minimal time spent debugging this week. A few hours were spent thinking about a graceful way to inform the user that a child had been deleted, though that was done while I was working on other aspects of the project. There was minimal time spent on research. There was a couple times that I did have to go back to Google Chrome and take a look at what I was about to do to make sure that I was implementing it properly, but that did go very quickly and was usually completed within just a couple minutes. In addition, I did spend a few hours refining the UI by implementing a subclass of a navigation controller, allowing the navigation bar to be consistent throughout the application and match the current branding of the application. I also changed some of the way that the table views were set up within the UI to match the look and feel of the rest of the application.